Hello and welcome to Let's Talk About That for a Minute, an hour-long show where we discuss various topics. Tonight I am very excited to announce my exclusive interview with Gary Wilson. You may know him from his legendary seminal album, You Think You Really Know Me. And guess what? He's got a new album coming out soon from Cleopatra Records called Marshmallow Man. I reached out to Gary Wilson. He is so much a part of the lineage that I do as an artist, and I had the honor of speaking with him. So I'm very excited to show with you guys tonight this interview. However, the quality does suffer just a bit because following that interview, we had a hurricane. My entire house was flooded, including this microphone and laptop. And so I fished out the microphone and laptop, put in this interview, and still have the responsibility to share it with the world. So, without further ado, this is my exclusive interview with the legendary Gary Wilson. And I want to thank you very much for being on the show. This is
Sure.
this is your first album since post-pandemic, right?
Uh, yeah, yes. That's, I guess my last album was 2020,
Right.
and that was Tormented. And yeah, it's a new one. Yep. It's coming soon. I was told from Cleopatra it was going to be February, so
Right.
we'll play it by ear, I guess.
You've been on Cleopatra for how long now?
Since 2013.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. What were you gonna say?
Have you heard the Christmas album?
I heard a little bit of that. Yeah.
It's coming up on Christmas.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you're in Florida, huh?
Yes, I am. You're on. We're both. Well, I would say I'm actually. I'm basically in an environment like where you began. I'm at my family's basement right now. So
Oh,
from
cool.
one basement act to another, here we are.
That's right. That's right. Well, my brother lives in Florida. He sometimes plays with my band, but he lives in I guess Boca Raton.
I'm actually in Boca Raton.
Yeah, coincidence there, huh?
That's very interesting. So hopefully,
Wilson,
yeah.
the Wilsons.
That,
But anyway,
yeah.
yeah. So that's cool, cool.
So tell me a little bit about how this record came to be.
Well, it was a while. I had to a bit of time during the pandemic, so I had a lot of time on my hand at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, it started at a certain point where because I had moved from one apartment into another one,
Mm-hmm.
and so a lot of my equipment was like in storage for a little bit. So, anyways, I finally got everything together, and it took it took a while to do it actually, because the whole recording process is. I guess that's the advantage of home recording. I mean, if I spent that much time in a studio, I'd be bankrupt. I mean,
Yeah, and it's also you're someone who's probably the most qualified I've noticed, not just in producing your own stuff, but in like not really having the studio, but still being able to create. Because I don't necessarily have a studio either myself. I've only had like instruments and literally like the same software I'm recording. I'm using Audacity even to record this interview, and I've always found a way of layering things. Um,
yeah,
you know what
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean? It's what you make, not how you do it. But it does matter sometimes. I mean, I don't know. Have you worked with any producers lately?
Well, I guess. Well, I guess the latest thing was G Herbo and Conway the Machine.
Mm-hmm.
I guess they sampled my Chromium Bitch. I guess that's just happened in the last month or something, and I got a track with Cool Keith in the works.
Okay.
And I don't. As far as producers, I usually work by myself, so it's not like I don't usually work with a producer.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I know.
I just do it myself, and I've been doing it a long time, so that's why plus I was a musician, so I started recording, I guess, right when the Beatles came out, I guess.
Yeah.
And I was in, I guess in fourth grade is when, I don't know how old I was at that point, 8 or 10 or something, 8 or 9, but I became a big fan of Dion and the Belmonts.
That's right. And I actually think, speaking of Boca Raton, we have Dion here in Boca Raton.
You're right.
As well.
You're right. And my brother knows him a little bit. I guess he attends the same church, I guess, as my brother plays bass.
Yeah.
In one of the church groups. I guess Dion comes in once in a while.
That's very interesting.
But anyway, yeah. So, we're talking, 1961, 62, 63. And, my father was a bass player, professional bass player. And so, I guess he would buy records for us, singles mostly. So, so I had a lot of like Bobby Rydell, Fabian, Dion, Brian Hyland. I'm just, lots of them. A good period of time for me. But anyways, and then fourth grade, so kind of my mother would curl my hair like Dion's.
Yeah.
So I would go to grammar school. Fourth, fifth grade was and a cool story about that whole thing is, Bobby Rydell was part of that whole teen idol scene at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And, I posted a picture of me when I was like 10 or something, 9 or 10, with my hair curled in the front or something. And you know who responded? This is on Twitter. Bobby Rydell.
No way.
Yeah. He says, "You got that look, Gary." I was, that made my day, I guess.
No, so you've definitely had the salute from your heroes, which that really actually warms my heart to hear for you.
Yeah. Well, as you notice, a lot of those teen idols, they used a lot of, relationships, girl names, and so that probably kind of carried over with my kind of Cindy and
Karen and Linda, yeah.
Yeah, that kind of teen idol that went a little off whack or something. I don't know.
But no, I understand what you mean, because I hear it in your music that underneath what is this very experimental, yes, but also dissonant atmosphere, there really is that same wholesomeness that you get with that era of the teen idol love songs. I think you have that idealistic quality. Is that something we're going to hear on this new record, you think?
Probably even more so.
Awesome.
It's kind of interesting. It's a nice album. Like I said, I put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into that album. That took a lot of work for me, actually, because I had to, remixing and all that, and noticing something out of whack, and then you got to go back, and then. Anyways, but I completed it. It's like giving birth, I guess, if I was a girl or something. You finally get the thing out, and and then now it's like we'll see where it goes. It's the cover is now made, I guess. And, as we move along, and actually, Cleopatra, I've got they asked me to be on an album. Actually, it's a the Beatles Abbey Road, kind of a tribute album, and they got like Rick Wakeman and Terry Reid and all these kind of people that are on Cleopatra, I guess.
That's funny that Cleopatra goes from Christian Death to Beatles tribute albums, but that's good, because I said yesterday to you, that they're a really underutilized label, but they have a nice history. Are you in Los Angeles? Are you local to them?
Well, I'm in San Diego, so I'm about 100 miles from Los Angeles.
Oh, so you're still in San Diego. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's like I've been on an extended vacation, I guess, for quite a few years.
Yeah, the second whole entire part of your career.
Yeah, so to speak. I guess
Why San Diego?
well, originally, when I self-released, You Think You Really Know Me at the time. I was, shopping at, hit all the places in New York City and, all the labels, and that was kind of fun. I went from Columbia Records to ESP Records, dropping off my record and album You Think You Really Know Me. And I kind of, exhausted sort of my, I'm sure I didn't hit every goddamn label, but I probably exhausted my things. I says, and a year prior to me self-releasing You Think You Really Know Me,
right?
A singer-songwriter from the 70s named Robbie Dupree. He had a bunch of hits in the 70s, but he was living in Woodstock, and I had sent a demo up to a publisher in Woodstock while I was in Endicott, and I was like, I don't know, 22. This was before, I finished You Think You Really Know Me on my own. But anyways, Robbie Dupree invited me to the best recording studio I've ever been in, called Bearsville Studios.
I was actually about to ask you. That was that's how you got to Bearsville, from that connection.
Yeah, I had sent, like I say, a demo to a publisher in Woodstock, and then he passed it on to Robbie Dupree, who liked the demos that I sent him. And so he invited me to Woodstock. So that's a funny story, too, because, I remember taking my father's car. At the time, my mother was the driver of the family. Then she passed away when I was 19. So my dad didn't drive. So anyways, I remember taking the car one day. I left him a note. I didn't even tell him. I said, Dad, I'm going to be gone for a few days. And I drove from Endicott to Woodstock, I remember.
Off to Bearsville?
Yeah, well, yeah. I spent about a week at Robbie Dupree's house, and but that studio, that was like fantastic. I could never, the drum sound they got, I remember, was such a rich, thick sound, I remember, on the snare. And then they had like I probably mispronounced it, a Bosendorfer piano, is equivalent to Steinway, but Bosendorfer, or like $100,000 grand piano. Effortless. It played itself almost, when you sat down on it. But anyway, so we recorded 4 tracks: Chromium Bitch, Loose Control, 6.4, and Groovy Girls. And we had the drummer from, there was a band called Orleans, Still the One. They had a bunch of hits in the 70s. But they were living in Woodstock at the time, and Robbie knew all these kind of musicians there, the Woodstock people. And but anyways, that was kind of a wild scene, I remember. It rained, I remember, for 5 days straight or something. You're out in the woods, Woodstock's out. But anyways, it was quite a thing in the recording. I had a cassette of it, and recently Cleopatra inquired about because it'd be a nice EP. It was 4 tracks in a state-of-the-art studio with, we had the 5-player there playing 5s, and like I say, the drummer for another famous band was on drums, but the sound they got. And then later, Todd Rundgren, I guess.
Yeah.
Todd Rundgren.
Yeah, he worked there with the band and everything. He was hired by Grossman, I believe, or something.
Yeah, I think Jerry Grossman or something. But, that's funny because I just did a show a couple years ago with Todd Rundgren.
I could definitely see that being a hell of a lineup. What was that like?
Yeah, well, that was a good one because the theme of Todd's show was called An Unpredictable Evening with Todd.
Oh, sweet.
Todd Rundgren, and he had, I guess, guy from the Cars was playing with him and some other celebrities. But anyways, he had an album. He has a new album on Cleopatra at the time. So anyways, our drummer or our keyboard bass player, he's a big fan of Todd. So, Todd was coming to San Diego. So, I said, well, let me see if I could, if we could open for Todd,
What was your were you ever, because I see someone like you and someone like Todd having a lot in common, not just with the versatility as multi-instrumentalist and the way to kind of bring conventional things into this pretty trippy light. Were you ever a fan of his? Were you ever like a fan of his? I don't see you being like a loyalist to anybody pretty much but Dion and that your initial stuff. But were you ever inspired in any way by the stuff Todd was doing around the time? Probably like around the time a little bit before you released your first record.
The Nazz, right? Wasn't that his band? The
Yeah,
Nazz.
yeah.
Back in the 60s, or I think, right? In the
Yeah,
later
yeah.
60s. But yeah, I was very familiar with Todd. I knew his reputation, and again, I never heard so much of Todd till I was with my guitar player who played his CDs as we rode from San Francisco to LA or San Diego. And I was, quite impressed because I didn't realize how progressive some of his stuff was, But, plus he was producing, I think he produced the New York Dolls, their first album. Yeah. Right, and that's a story in itself. See, when I was I graduated from high school in 1971.
Right.
And at that time, you only had to be 18 to go into bars and drink. So when I turned 18, I was 17 when I graduated, but I turned 18 within 1971. Anyways, so I went to New York quite often to see, some of these, I saw the New York Dolls, when, 73 or whatever the year was. So, I saw a good concert there. Iggy and the Stooges, 1973, at Max's Kansas City, Manhattan. And that was cool,
Oh yeah, no, that was for me, that's kind of the place to be, is the proto punk era and the mid mid 70s, pretty much early mid 70s, when you had like television, you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, Iggy was,
and of course,
the album, of course, he had albums in the 60s too, 69, 68.
Yep.
But he was making a comeback. He had been signed to Columbia Records, and I guess David Bowie produced the album, but it was
right.
Raw Power. And that's when I saw him in 1973 when he was promoting Raw Power. So I got to see Iggy and the Stooges in a small club right up front. I remember coming from a small town. I remember thinking, boy, this is real rock and roll, and this is they had like two double stacked Marshalls on each side.
Yeah.
It was a real powerful looking band. And anyways, I got to see them. And then I tried to move to Manhattan after I graduated in '71.
How that panned out for you, Manhattan?
Well, it was quite a rough experience. I was still, like I said, I graduated when I was 17. And my buddy Vince Rossi, we decided we're going to move to New York City and become folk singers. That's how we'd make some money. So I took a violin and Vince took an acoustic guitar. So we get to New York City and, nothing works out. So, we ran out of money pretty quick. We stayed at I had $100.
Yeah.
We stayed at the YMCA for a couple nights, and that was terrible.
Oh,
it was like summer, and the air conditioner wasn't working, and it's like this closet-sized room, I remember, and hot. Anyway, so the money, we ran out pretty quick, and my parents, we had a summer home on Lake Ontario, Sodas Point, and they were gone. We didn't have a phone at this place, a cottage on the lake, and they went off for vacation. my father's vacation, and so I couldn't call home. I didn't have a dime to call home, though I could have maybe tried collect, but they weren't home. There's no way to reach my parents. So, anyways, we ran out of money, and next thing I'm sleeping in Washington Square. Vince and I got a violin.
With the violin.
Yeah, luckily we didn't get robbed. Like I said, it was a rough year. The 70s, the 60s were over now, and that was, people were getting mugged. The apartments had like 6, 7 blocks, I remember.
Yeah, and the whole vibe was going from like Summer of Love to just straight up heroin shit.
Exactly, a lot of, drug guys were mugging people, and that's where you got like those Death Wish movies with Bronson and
Taxi Driver and shit.
Yeah, the vigilante guys was tired of getting mugged, right? But anyway, so I got to see, plus, I got to see a lot of like jazz guys, up close in small clubs. I remember going to see probably 71, 72 going in a small bar on the Bowery, I remember.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like 7 people in there, and there's Don Cherry and Billy Higgins on, all these people I had albums of, and I thought, geez, these guys are like the old legends and stuff. And, to them it was just another gig, I think, I understand that ideal too.
That's something else that rubbed off on you. I've seen, well, not seen in person, but I'm familiar that you have gigged a lot just at doing the lounge thing as a member of a jazz band.
Yeah. Well, I think Carrie's from my dad. My father had a good deal. He played with a quartet at a
upright basses, right?
He had a hotel for like 20, 30 years, 4 nights a week. Like I tell people, I'm a whip compared to my father. He worked at IBM not only 5 days a week. He'd go in on Saturday, 6 days to get up extra hours. And then he played 4 nights a week, 9 to 1 at a hotel for, literally 30 years. That was a good gig, right? 30 years, 4 nights a week with a house band, I guess you'd call it. The Dubonnet Lounge, I remember. And anyway, so that whole thing carried over. But, like I say, the whole, like I said, from the Dion days.
Yeah.
And then the Beatles, 1964, Hard Day's Night movie came out. And that was like, we're now into the height of Beatlemania we're coming now. And I remember I'm in like 6th grade, I remember seeing the Beatles on the big screen, on a big black and white with loud sound. And I'm thinking, boy, this is phenomenal.
Oh, yeah.
For a little boy, that was, and then like 65.
Yeah.
I went to Shea Stadium to see the Beatles.
Oh, so you've seen the Beatles too?
Yep, 1965 at the big concert at Shea Stadium. That was like the height of Beatlemania. That was like, and I'm like, what was I? I was in 6th grade, I believe, 6th grade.
Now you weren't as close. You weren't as close to the Beatles as you were Iggy Pop. I'm imagining. I'm sure that was a huge thing. I'm sure you.
Oh, it was. It was hard. Like you said, that's a huge stadium. So and back then too, the sound wasn't what they could do today. So,
right.
But it was the whole scene. It was like it was deafening. All you could hear was screaming, and it was like you had to hold your ears almost. And
the girls crying, just weeping.
Yeah, it was like I said. This was, what you have read about or seen.
Yeah.
It was kind of cool to experience that at, 6th grade going into 7th grade. So anyway, now everybody wants to be in a band like the Beatles, right? So.
Well, at least then, I think everybody wants to be more in the Aaron Carter, Justin Bieber thing these days, which I definitely wasn't amongst, but definitely then. I mean, it's weird how music and people. It's like there's always been the pop star, then the Beatles created this possibility where everybody should be in a band, needs to be in a band, and now we're just kind of like people want to do either something like this, podcasting, or they want to be a producer. It's I don't know where bands fit in now.
Yeah, well, I understand that. You just gotta, like I tell people, you got to walk your own path. That was one thing I learned from John Cage.
Yeah.
Was, walk your own path. Try not to sound like other people if possible. Like I always say, John Cage went through a certain period where, he had a certain, I'm not going to say totally European a little bit, Schoenberg, he had kind of early stuff. But when he hit the 50s, in the 1950s, that's when it totally went into a stride. Like I always tell people, one of the most inspiring albums for me when I was in 8th or ninth grade, I think it was in 8th grade. At that time, I was playing with a rock band called Lord Fuzz in 8th grade. But my brother was going to the local university, so they had a really good music collection. And anyway, so I picked out an album called John Cage's retrospect, 25 years from his beginning to 1958, recorded live in 1958 at Alice Tully Hall, I believe. And you can see his progression, as he went, percussion and prepared piano and such, pretty stuff too on the prepared piano.
And it was actually music. It wasn't just silence this time.
Yeah, there's a certain thing to it. And, but this one cut or the two cuts on the album, my favorite ones were when he hit like his last ones up to 1958. He progressed. It's like a, I forget if it was a 2 or 3 album set. But anyways, when I heard this piece called Concert for Piano and Orchestra with David Tudor, my favorite pianist, David Tudor, on piano, man, I never heard anything like that. And I was listening, like I said, you were listening to psychedelic music, so that brought you into, plus I was playing in the school orchestra, all the Wilsons had to play an instrument when we were growing up in the 50s and 60s.
Awesome.
So I started playing cello and bass. My dad was the bass player, so I started on cello and bass in grammar school and, continued up, through high school and playing in.
So you're classically trained and you read music?
Yeah. And I was actually in the New York State Youth Orchestra. That was a weird time, too. I often reflect on that, thinking, that must have been 7th grade or 8th grade, or I forget what grade. And everybody met in this gymnasium on a Saturday to rehearse. So all the children were there. We're all, young. And it was weird. I just that was like the beginning of, being on stage, that you have to perform proper, But anyways.
When did songwriting and lyrics kind of come into at what point? Because I know that you were recording as early as early as preteen age, but when did when did the I don't know, how do you start, just like, okay, this is the song, this is how I write? Was there like a poetic element to it?
Well, actually, what happened is I wrote a song. Like I said, we had like a big organ and a few instruments around like that, about 4 string basses. But anyways, I lost track what I was going to say. What did I just say? I forgot.
I was just asking how you got into writing lyrics.
Oh yeah. So anyway, like 4th or 5th grade, I wrote my first song, I guess, and it was very heavily influenced, like a Dion song. I think of One Day I Met a Girl. Maybe I'll record it again. My first song in 5th grade.
I hope you do.
And I remember my mom or something, some magazine, you spend money and they'll publish it or something, some ripoff basically. And so my mom paid $100 to get it published by, I don't want to say the name, I can remember even now.
Yeah.
And then they sent you back a professional looking sheet music of your song. And I guess I had sent them I must have known chords at the time because, like I said, it was kind of a Dion song. But anyways, that was
Right.
when I first started, and then, like I said, then that carried into the Beatles, and then my first band, seventh grade. All of a sudden, my brother had a Wallensack tape recorder, and I was like, and then I wrecked that. But anyways, he had a Wallensack mono tape recorder. He had a good paper route, so he had made money, so he bought a tape recorder. And so I probably started fooling with the tape recorder in seventh grade and, making songs. And I kind of wish I hung on to those because, I started doing a lot of speed manipulation on voices and chipmunk sounds. And
Yeah, I've heard it in some of your new stuff too. I mean,
yep.
yeah, but I mean, it's a lot. It's like 2 clicks now to get to that compared to actually speeding up the tape with your like from
Yeah,
your yeah.
yeah. It's actually better. I'll tell you, in my own opinion, after using some of this digital stuff, even, because I don't record. I don't use a computer to record.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I got like a standalone Tascam
Okay.
2488. It's a digital. It's a hard drive, but it's beautiful, really. Coming from my mono Wallensack tape recorder from 1966 or 65.
Right.
And then getting into this one, but back then you had to make the most of what you had.
Mm-hmm.
So I started off, then my mom, Lord Fuzz, my first professional band where we got paid to play. I was in 8th grade, so my mother bought me a Sony stereo tape recorder. A deck, it was a deck, no speakers.
Mm-hmm.
So now that was a 2-head machine. So now you could turn yourself into 2 people. That's the difference between a 2-head and a 3-head tape recorder. The 2-head you could do that. The 3-head, because of the 3 heads, you couldn't do that sync. You couldn't sync it. But anyways, and then I had a friend who, his father worked for, Macintosh audio equipment, and he had his state of the art system. I don't know. Are you familiar with Macintosh?
Well, yeah.
Like preamps and power amps.
Oh no, not in that. Not of that. Not of that. Not of that. Creed.
That's a different company.
Oh, really?
This is Macintosh. They've been making them since the late 40s. And anyways, they're like $5,000. Two massive, very highly desirable audio equipment. But anyways, he had a great system. His father, the kid I hung out with, used to take all our pictures for my band when we were back then in 8th grade. Anyway, so he had this like state of the art Macintosh equipment. Plus, he had 2 Ampex tape recorders, stereo. Probably from 1959, 1960, Ampex tape recorders.
Yeah.
So like in 8th grade and stuff, I'd go over to his house with my Sony 2-channel tape or something and feed it into his Ampex and turn myself into 4 people somehow, doing it the harder way. Now, like I say, with unlimited tracks, that's not even thought of.
Yeah.
Back then, it was hard to, get yourself to turn yourself into, 4 people or 5 people. I knew, Chet Atkins and Les Paul, they were fooling with that, multi-syncing, but for the consumer, you had to work with what you had. So it was a process. And then, like I said, I'm playing in the school orchestra, plus I'm playing in a rock band now. It's like 8th grade, 9th grade, and I'm writing classical avant-garde music now because now I'm into weird music and,
Yeah.
The psychedelic bands kind of, drifted into it. And now you got Frank Zappa. And I got to see Frank Zappa in the 1960s with the original Mothers of Invention. I was in 8th grade or 9th grade. And and it
What?
was.
That had to have been. Was that like? So that was that 60. That was like late 60s.
Yeah, 67 is when
So that was the perfect. That was like the we're only in it for
eighth
the
grade.
money. Like post. Yeah,
Oh,
that's
yeah, that's his. To me, that's his best album.
yeah.
We're only in it. That's when it
Yeah.
happened.
That's where a lot of that kind those effects are utilized. So you're talking about.
Yeah, that was a great album. And but anyway, so Zappa talking about Edgar Perez, his influences of modern composers so that led me into wondering about those people. And then, but John Cage was the one that totally, like I said, so then I was going to libraries in 8th, ninth grade to listen to the records on their record collections. The libraries always had a good record collection, I remember. And, and they had modern music, modern classical music, so you got a lot of European stuff, Berio, Boles,
Mm-hmm.
and Stockhouse, a lot of stuff from Europe. But anyways, so it was all mixing together. So now I'm in a psychedelic rock band in 8th grade, and we were good. Cleopatra released a record we made in 1967 with my first band, Lord Fuzz, and that was kind of fun.
When did they release that one?
Well, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, 4 years ago. It's called Lord Fuzz.
So it's like that's like a complete like the complete recordings kind of thing, or like the recordings you guys did have.
Well, that's what it was. We only had 2 records in existence left in the world, and that was the guitar player Carmen Petrino, my best friend since 4th grade. Anyways, he had a copy, so he gave me a copy, and then Cleopatra sent that copy to some famous guy who does it in New York, who
mastering.
Extracts it from a record, vinyl, and so that was a treat, actually. Who would have expected that?
Yeah, really.
Some record that I made as a kid that had limited amount of copies even made. It was a local record anyway. And then to have it reissued, And then it's funny, the guitar player with the blind dates with my band, he's always wanting to do that song from, the one we made in 1967. I was playing Farfisa organ, actually, with the band. My dad, like I say, that was that time, when, the portable organs started coming out. My dad we had a Laurie organ, a big home organ. But when I got into a band, and we used to haul that in 7th grade, I used to be with my brother hauling a Laurie organ around, and my parents having them drive us somewhere to rehearse with some bands. But anyway, then my father bought a Farfisa organ, I remember, 1966, 67, something like that area. So then I got into a band called Lord Fuzz, and they were a working band, and good chemistry, that's important with the band, and these are like, all Italian kids who lived within a 2-block radius or something.
So I'm guessing that has like a progressive sound to it, psychedelic or progressive, something in that nature.
Well, we were the band. We weren't so much doing original music, though. We cut the record.
Okay.
But we were doing, the best of that era. 67, The Summer of Love. You had some great music at that time. You had not only the British stuff, but you had, Jimi Hendrix and the psychedelic stuff from LA and San Francisco, and so you had a lot of going on at that time, and we played that good. Actually, we had a good. Gosh, we're only like 13 years old, and we're playing against bands that were, in their 20s, but we had a good chemistry. That's what I always tell people in a band. And that's not always good. Hard to, sometimes that's hard to find, the chemistry where the band really gels, I guess you would put it.
Yeah.
And you can fake it. Believe me, I played in So that's what I'm trying to say. So all this kind of coming together, right? So now now Lord Fuzz has disbanded. So
Right.
now I took over the band. So now we went total original now. And then now we did weird shows. So, in a small town, it was tough. It was hard enough to get in though there were more places to play when we were young. See, that's what was different in the psychedelic era. You had places for kids, that they would turn in places into psychedelic rooms, with amoebas on the wall flying,
Yeah, the classic.
Yeah, so it was cool times, and I saw many bands, I remember one band you're probably familiar with, Ronnie Dio, and he would come in with his band. He lived about 40 miles from Endicott in a town called Cortland, I believe. But he had a band called the Electric Elves, I remember.
Oh yeah. I know it is Elf, but yeah.
Yeah, well, this is like, pre him getting into Black Sabbath.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he did an interesting.
So he was playing some of the same places that my first band, Lord Fuzz, was playing. So we never shared the stage together. But it's funny because the last time I remember being in a, he was playing like in a barn or something in a small town. I don't know if it was Owego, New York, or someplace, not far from Endicott. I remember.
Mm-hmm.
And then next thing, I'm still in high school now, and you hear Roddy Dio joined Black Sabbath, or some local kid made out good, But anyways, yeah. So now all of a sudden, I took over the psychedelic band that played the best of the '60s stuff, and we went weird now. So now I'm going into high school. So now I've been composing classical stuff, very John Cage stuff, Cajun. And the school string ensembles and stuff would play my works. So I got to hear it. I remember that was like one of the most exciting things I remember was we had like a string quintet, I forget what at the time, and I wrote a piece for the string quintet. But I recorded it on a school tape recorder. They had a stereo one. And I recorded like 2 separate performances. And they were sort of random anyways. And I remember hearing the two together colliding. I remember thinking, wow, it was all of a sudden turned into 10 strings, all of a sudden. And, playing one of my early pieces. But anyways, my teacher, she played, we'd play after school events in the school auditorium or something. My teacher, I remember one time when she's doing one of my pieces and she's reaching over with, she's a violin virtuoso, so she's reaching over with her violin bow, blowing on the head of the piano player on his hair, and we're just doing some really wild stuff, But I was very heavily with John Cage at this point. That was my John Cage period, I always say. And then Miss Sally Schaefer was her name, and and she mentioned, why don't you reach out to John Cage? And I'm like in 10th grade now, so I'm 15 years old. So lo and behold, I went to the post office in Endicott, and they had a Manhattan phone book. And there's a lot of John Cages that live in New York City. So somehow I went down them all and I tracked them, and he said, send this, I had scores, music scores, manuscript stuff.
Right.
And he said, well, send them to this box office, blah, blah. Then he'd look at them, and then I, followed it up. I said 2 or 3 weeks later, and, he invited me to his house. Now, I'm like 15 years old, so, and my mother, so now we're going to drive from Endicott to Haverstraw, New York, somewhere, outside of Manhattan, 30, 40 miles in the woods. Wow. He's out in the woods, in this wooded area. So, it's about a 3-hour drive or something, I remember, from Endicott to there, and going through the woods and all this. And so we get to John Cage's place, or his town, and we get lost. So my mother and I are lost looking for John Cage's house, and so all of a sudden, there's a general store, so we stopped, and I called John Cage, and I said, "Mr. Cage, we can't find your house." So John Cage drives down in his car. He picks me up in the car. My mom waits for me at the general store, and John Cage drives me to his house. Now we're making small talk, John Cage and I in the car.
Yeah.
And I remember one thing he said that struck me, and I'm still only 15 years old, and he's much older than that. But he said, "Gary, I never made enough money off music till I was 50 years old."
Wow.
Not sure why he told me that at that time. But
Yeah, I don't know if that was him like giving you a hex or something.
Yeah, well, it was, it's almost like it actually did happen.
Yeah, no, I remember.
Where I call it my resurrection.
Right.
But anyway, that John Cage thing, and then, like I said, so we drove me to his house, and then I remember his house had very sparse furniture. Like one room had a Buddha doll in the corner, and that was it. And then another room had a hammock or something stretched across the room. And
that sounds pretty fitting for John Cage.
Yes, he was into that kind of thing.
Minimalist in every way. A minimalist in every aspect.
Yeah, it's just over like 2 or 3 hours, and we went over my scores with John Cage looking at something, and he point out on my manuscript, like, "Well, what do you want the trombone player to play there?" And I'd say, "Well, Glashendo, Loda High," and then he'd scribble my thing out. I wish I still had these.
Wow.
Scribbled mine out and put it in the correct notation for the orchestra to interpret it properly, And he also gave me a score of one of his pieces. I remember one of his piano pieces, one of his published pieces, and it was like a work of art. It was for a pianist.
So your first collab was with John Cage, basically.
Well, I don't know. It was just a very big thing,
Oh, yeah.
I'm glad my mom took me, drove me there.
Yeah.
When I look back at it, Juilliard grad students would die to have a one-on-one with John Cage, and somehow he invites a strange boy, 15-year-old kid from a tiny town,
right,
to spend time not only in a classroom but at his house, going personally over my music. I look back at it and I'm thinking, how the hell did I pull that one off? That was. But anyways, that was a huge thing for Gary. So now I'm in my John Cage period. Plus, I'm in a rock band also, so now I'm incorporating it all.
So this is like the formation of your sound,
You're right. And so I just kept thinking, how can I do this? I said sometimes I'd go to a John Cage or a modern music performance, and it left me a little dry. And I kept thinking, wouldn't it be better if we had Dion or Bobby Rydell or Fabian in front of a John Cage show? Wouldn't we want to see Tony Bennett with a bucket of flour coming out in front of a John Cage show? So I don't know if that's what finally osmoted into it by the time I hit You Think You Really Know Me, but
no, that's perfect. That sounds like a very perfect origin for that.
Yeah, because sometimes modern music or noise music or whatever you want to call it,
right,
can leave you without a personal thing. So I was and believe me, I was doing shows where we were just no songs, just total 40 minutes of smashing. We'd go out and get bales of hay and paint and chocolate milk and instruments and just smash the fucker. We did a New York State Battle of the Bands, right? I'm like in 15, I think Frank Roma, Carmen, and all my buddies. And this wasn't just a local Battle of the Bands, this was a state one.
Where they were all everywhere, like from all sorts of towns. They were all coming in for this national.
New York. And I
statewide.
I wasn't even doing songs at this point. I'm doing like a total John Cage smashing. We used to put contact mics on chalkboards and scratch them with our fingernails amplified, and Frank Roma played, saxophone and clarinet, and then we'd have tapes, and Vince had his, feedback and everything, tapes going. It was just total insanity, you know, you know. And so this was like still before, like I said, so everything was beginning to form. Is what I'm trying to say.
What was the reaction from the Battle of the Bands crowd like with you guys doing that stuff on stage?
Well, it's funny because in the Gary Wilson documentary.
Yeah, I've just watched that before I spoke with you.
One of the guys, Rick Maturani, actually he makes reference to that. That we did that show. I don't think we won.
I don't think we won.
I think I don't know. I don't remember them turning us off at that point. But we played some places where people wanted to kill us.
Oh man!
I mean, in small towns, they didn't. We did one show in Owego, New York, which is maybe 12 miles from Endicott or something, but real small. And we played a place, and they're probably expecting a top 40 rock band, hard rock band.
Just something that will make money.
Yeah, exactly. And then we come in, and we're doing. I had a band called, I think, Dr. Zork and the Warts. And so this was, like I say, and anyway, so the audience started disliking us. We came in all kinds of weird outfits, and now we're incorporating music. So now I'm doing music. It's not just smashing. So anyway, yeah, I don't know, 20 minutes in or 30 minutes in, the crowd is getting hostile now at us. They don't like our music. And these are like farm boys from a small town, they're out for Friday night, half drunk probably as kids, teenagers. But anyway, so they start getting madder and madder at us, and we fed on that. See, that's what the thing of the Endicott song we always talked about, was our band would feed off that negative energy and prompt us to do worse. Mm-hmm. So now the band, the audience is getting more riled up, and now the guitar player, he's got his microphone stand threatening the audience, and they're screaming, "Come on, get off this!" And now we're like in danger. They want to beat us up, right? And now the owner comes rushing in, and he's like, "What's wrong? What's going on here? Play!" I'm going there. They want to, they're gonna kill us. He's going, "Oh, you gotta play, this." Next thing, we got a police come in, and we get a police escort out of the building. I remember it. But, I kind of enjoyed that sort of thing, back then. It was kind of put your band in the worst places sometimes. We played for like an American Legion, guys with the caps on,
Oh, wow.
And I came in there, and we did a total like John Cage noise smashing thing, and when they want, they're expecting a polka band or something, right? Mm-hmm. And I think they were just like, after 20 or 30 minutes, they shut us down for sure. But like I said,
it's like time to go, boys.
Well, it was fun. So you had to do fun things in a small town when you and your friends. What can you do? You don't want to beat up people, so you get into the creative outlet of things, and I chased after, like I said, and so now getting out of high school. Cool thing too. You're familiar with Captain Beefheart?
Love Beefheart, yeah.
I got to meet Captain Beefheart when I was in, I think, 11th or 12th grade. Captain Beefheart had, it was a good story. Frank Roma. Frank was a few years older than me, but Captain Beefheart was promoting Trout Mass Replica. He very seldom toured. And anyways, he came, one of their shows, he came into Ithaca, New York, which is 40 miles from Endicott, let's say, Cornell University up in that area. But he was playing in a bar venue, let's put it that way. Small, not a real big place. And anyway, so this was a bar, so I'm still like, I don't know, 16, I think, at the time. So I borrowed my brother's ID, and back then you didn't have pictures on the IDs, right? So You only had to be 18 anyway, so
Yeah,
probably close to that anyway. So anyways, Frank Roma and I drive. Frank drives. He's the first guy with a license, right? Because he's older, a few years older. So we drive to Ithaca, and we get to the venue, and nobody's there yet. We were, way too early, right? So Frank and I are in the place, just him and I, sitting. The bar's on another area. And who comes walking in? Captain Beefheart and his manager.
Wow.
And he comes in to look over the stage. There's nobody in there now except Frank and I. So, okay, now's the time where opportunities is now to, so we go up to him at the stage. And like I say, it's a small bar, really. And we start conversing, and Frank Roma, who played sax with me, he always carried reeds, extra saxophone reeds for his clarinet and his sax. So he always had a few for the mouthpiece you put a reed on. And for some reason, Beefheart, he played soprano sax also. So for some reason, he couldn't find a reed or something. So next thing, Frank Roma and Captain Beefheart's using one of Frank Roma's reeds for a saxophone.
Wow.
So Frank and him are adjusting it on the clarinet or on the Beefheart saxophone. And I brought a demo up on a cassette. I remember I had a demo of something that I'd made during that period.
Yeah.
So I handed it over to Beefheart, and we conversed, and and I thought, well, okay. Then the band was phenomenal.
Oh yeah. He had the best lineup at that point.
This was like Trout Mass Replica band.
Yeah, that was the best lineup at that point. That
you're right. Yeah,
best lineup.
That was the real thing.
Yeah.
That was the Trout Mass Replica bands. And they sounded just like the album. I remember saying, boy, these guys got it.
You drilled that into them.
Yeah, so, this is, I don't know what year that was. So it was 70, 69. I don't know what year they put that album out. Then I saw them later. I saw them another time when they did lick my decals off. And then I saw him with, he had Ed Tripper or whatever, the guy from the Mothers, was playing marimba, Ed Marimba, and they were really good. I saw them like in a Scranton or Pennsylvania or Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, in a small bar. But it was kind of cool to see them in small venues up close, but anyways.
Well, when you think about that, Beefheart was never the sellout stadium guy that Frank was. Even in not like it wasn't not intentionally, but he didn't intentionally. Obviously he didn't. I think he would have toured more had he had more commercial success. But he, his biggest successes was what he did artistically.
Yeah. Well, that's always the best, probably.
That's the best success.
Because his drummer was a Drumbo, I forget remember his drummer, Beefheart's drummer. He's got my friend on Facebook, actually. But as a matter of fact, I mentioned to him, I said, I saw you guys at Ithaca. He goes, yeah. But anyways, yeah, they were great. And then, like I say, at this point now, I'm getting ready to graduate from high school, and that's always a strange period, all of a sudden most of your friends are going out of state, they're going somewhere else to go to college.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're stuck home at your parents' home watching TV from 1971 or something, but 72. Anyways, so at that point we tried to move to New York right after I graduated, 71. And you know who I saw in 71?
Who's that?
The Suicide.
Okay, that's another thing there's another thing there. We're putting all the pieces together of who Gary Wilson is now. You see what I mean? So what was that Suicide like?
Well, I was interested because, like I said, now we're penniless, walking around down in the village somewhere, and all of a sudden we heard all this noise and feedback. There's noise and lights going on in the loft, and that's kind of why we went to New York anyway. We wanted to see something like this.
That, right?
So anyways, we walked upstairs. It was a free show, I guess. And all of a sudden, there's a guy with a chain hitting himself. I remember whipping himself with a chain.
Yeah.
And then the keyboard guy or whatever, he was making noise on something. And, this is like before suicide even. It's just the early days, They're probably more known like in 76 and 77.
Right.
Yeah, this was like early suicide. I got to see them raw. And they were very raw. But anyway. So now we're like stuck in New York with no money. So now it's late. So now we're going to walk, from the village to Washington Bridge. The Washington Bridge.
Yeah.
That's pretty far.
That's rough, man.
And we couldn't even afford a subway. We had to walk.
Yeah. I've actually that's happened to me too in New York City.
Yeah.
Can't even afford a subway, man.
I got a violin. Guitar player, so now we're walking across the Washington Bridge at 4 in the morning or 3 in the morning. I'm looking down at the water going, this is spooky.
Yeah.
And then we get at the end of the bridge, and now you're in like this, I don't know if it was like an industrial or this kind of danky looking, darky looking buildings on the water there, on the docks or something.
Mm.
And then I was trying, I don't know why I blacked out on this, but we decide, don't ask me why, Vince wants to go below Atlantic City. There's a town down there, Ocean City or something down there. They got a boardwalk and all this, but it's below Atlantic City. So now we're going to have to get down there with no money.
Yeah.
No food. So we decide we're going to hitchhike on the turnpike. Now, who the hell's going to pick me up on the turnpike? We got 2 kids with long hair. We're 17 or something,
Yeah.
Who's going to stop on the fucking turnpike to pick up 2 kids,
Yeah.
But somebody must have. This is where I black out. I do not know how I got below Atlantic City, because that's not close. That's a little bit of a ways. I don't know who picked us up, but we got there somehow. I remember sleeping for a night or 2 on the side of the highway. That was terrible. I'm thinking, what the hell am I doing this for? I should be back home.
Was it brutally cold, or was it like?
Well, no, this is summer. So
okay, at least it was summer.
Yeah, so now it's humid and hot, sticky,
yeah.
And you can't clean yourself now, so you're.
Yeah, you got the clothes on your back.
Yeah. So we get below,
man.
and we found a crawl space under the boardwalk, under a building that was like untouched sand, so super white, clean sand under this crawl space. So Vince Rossi and I are sleeping under the boardwalk, and I'm thinking, geez, we're going to starve to death. I didn't know what to do. At that age, what do you do? We were too young is what it was. I didn't realize I should have waited till I was at least 18 or 19. But then I could get a job more easily. But anyway, so now we decided we got to get back home. So we must have went back out on a highway. I don't know if it was a throughway again. It must have been a highway. So we're hitchhiking. And this nice little Oriental lady, older lady with a Volkswagen picked us up on the side of the highway and drove us all the way to Endicott. And that's like, a couple 100 miles, if not farther. And, but the one thing that always struck me is we're starving now. And she stopped at McDonald's and bought us a hamburger. And the hamburger had a pickle and ketchup on it, and I couldn't eat it because of the pickle. I remember. I always like plain stuff, plain cheese. But anyways, I must have known I'm going to be home soon. And then she dropped us off at Endicott, and so we still had to walk a little bit of ways from where she dropped us off. And I'm thinking, and the first thing I did was got home and had money there somehow. Ordered a pizza, I remember, thinking, and I never left home again for 7 more years, till I was 25 or 24, 25, I guess.
Right.
But anyway, so the music starts developing. So now I'm able to see. I've seen a lot of the fusion guys because I like that stuff too. So I was seeing Herbie Hancock with Headhunters in the early '70s. Chick Corea with Return to Forever, and I've seen a lot of these bands. Keith Jarrett, that was a great show. I saw him in Manhattan at a small club. And he's got his quartet with my favorite bass player, or one of my favorite on bass, Charlie Haight on bass, but he's with, super sensitive. Are you familiar with Keith Jarrett, jazz pianist?
Wow, I see how knee deep you've always been in jazz. That's one thing. Like I like jazz personally. I just have not been able to. I could only go so I can only go in that weird direction that is like, okay, like maybe this could maybe this could like bring up the idea of it, or capture it, but I just know that I don't have those chops, and I also haven't. And another thing is I haven't listened to enough of it, and to be quite honest.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, like I say, my dad played stand-up bass in a quartet, an instrumental quartet, so I had that all the time. He was already playing, but you have different types of jazz. I mean, and that's another thing. When I got back from Endicott, now I turned 18. When and now I could play in bars, and now I could play in places. And being my father, being a professional union bass player, I got pushed into. His advice was getting a working band. So, and so, anyways, so that's now all of a sudden. And it's funny, I've carried on that tradition up to literally 2 years ago, where I was playing in lounge bands. Nobody knew who Gary Wilson was, and I kind of liked that. So
I've always liked that about you too. Is that, or from what, like I feel that in my own, because I'm basically like I'm either a telemarketer or dishwasher. I kind of have like two different jobs I'm capable of doing. It's either phone sales or washing dishes. And I used to be like, yeah, I'm gonna get out of this shithole, and I'm 28 now, so like now it's like I just kind of I used to kind of scorn the idea of, oh, I'm just a musician by night kind of thing, because it's like, no, this is a job for me. This is I wake up, I'm doing this, I'm recording until the sun goes down. But what I've realized is that, especially from like that kind of mentality, is that nobody needs to know. You can just pretty much be. You can don the cape at night. You can pretty much just go, or when you have your own, There's it's just the rest of the world doesn't matter. You don't have to be. Like I don't have to be Mr. Pope to everybody. You don't have to be that Gary Wilson to everybody, but you can still definitely you playing in that
well,
kind of.
You're playing music too. That's important. That's why you got into playing music, if you want to play music, But like I said, I was fortunate, even in the Triple Cities, Endicott, when I turned 18.
Oh yeah.
I started actually playing with I don't know if you're familiar with Peggy Lee Bishop, jazz vocalist.
Yeah.
And he had retired in Owego, New York, actually. But anyways, he put together a trio with a girl singer, kind of sophisticated jazz pop, let's put it that way. And the drummer was, was the vice president of the Musicians Union. So this was a band you wanted to get in because they got the best gigs, and nobody fooled with you because your drummer's the vice president of the union. And back then, union was that you had to be in union to play the best rooms. So, anyways, so I remember I really wanted this gig because now I'm out of high school, so I got to make some money, right? I'm still living home, but this is a working band, and a good working band, very more of my taste, So, anyways, I auditioned, got the gig, and I remember my first gig, and it was a week later. I don't know if you're familiar with a kind of a jazz trumpet player, Clark Terry.
I am not.
Yeah, kind of a famous trumpet player, but anyways, he was playing at the university, and I remember our first gig was backing him, and then my piano player, because Leonard Coris, he was the like I said, he played with Sinatra, all these famous people, so he was the real deal, I learned a lot from Lenny. I'm still like 18, 19, 20, and these guys are in their 60s and stuff. So they're mature. They know. And like I said, Lenny, he was the real deal. That's all I can say. He played. I was playing bass, but Lenny played keyboards. And he had his Fender Rhodes and the ARP synthesizer. 1972, 73, or And anyways, so I stayed with them for quite a while, and that was a good experience. Like I said, I learned a lot from Lenny because he was also professional arranger.
Right.
So he would do stuff for MGM. Movies. If you saw a piano player in a movie part or some guys in the corner, that was Lenny.
Right. Yeah.
So he played with like Dorsey. I mean, he played with all these big bands. We had good talks. But like I say, he retired. He had a bad heart, so he didn't want to really go crazy. Matter of fact, we were playing the Ramada Inn. I remember in Binghamton, and not that we're doing 4 hours a night, right? And he gets a call from Peggy Lee, right? She needs him to come play piano for her at the Rockefeller Center or something, the Rainbow Room or one of those big rooms in New York. But he couldn't go. He's saying that he can't do it anymore, or something. But he had like great tales of, playing like the Copacabana in New York and playing with, the big bands. And I used to say, and making big money. I mean, I still can't figure it out. These bands that are like almost 20-piece bands or whatever, and they all got paid well. But yet in the 30s and the 40s,
Mm-hmm.
you're only charging $1 to get in the room, right?
Yeah.
If you're lucky. How the hell could they afford 20 musicians all making, like Lenny said, but it was very professional. He would tell me, it wasn't, you don't do one show. He's going,
And that's the true life of a musician with the jazz. You notice is that they live really like very very subpar qualities of life compared to but it's a career thing. It's to me that's where the true blue collar is. That's where the true that's where the true spirit is in that kind of music and living like that, playing like that.
Well, anything, if you want to put your heart and soul in it, the whole thing is finding your voice. That's always not the easiest. Like I say, when we start in music or art or whatever, we're usually inspired by somebody, so we kind of tend to go towards that, sounding similar in some ways. But it takes a while. Like I tell young bands that sometimes I said you got to find your voice so that when they hear something, they'll say, okay, that's they can identify it. It's and that doesn't come easy. Like I told you, I went through all kinds of playing with sophisticated jazz guys really, and but also doing very avant-garde shows. I remember once we did a real crazy show, right? So another one was Smashing or something in the park in Binghamton somewhere, and then I had to rush home, jump in the bathtub, and then put a tuxedo on and play at a fancy restaurant or something. But the contrast,
you had the pain, the blood, and all that stuff from your normal show, and then you had to go put on the
and then become a side man on the side for somebody playing in a good places, country
jazz,
clubs or restaurants, and see, but then the story keeps twisting. This is what I'm saying. I could go on forever with stories, but So, anyways, by this time, I'm leading up to You Think You Really Know Me, right? So, I'm still not there yet. I put out 2 records pre You Think You Really Know Me. Another Galaxy, which was kind of more of an instrumental album, and then Dreams, a single called Dreams and Soul Travel. And this was before You Think You Really Know Me. You Think You Really Know Me, I released in 77. So I probably made that in 76, I think. And then these other records were like 74 and 75 or something. I'm still trying to figure out who's Gary Wilson, right? So now you got Barry White, Barry White stuff going on, and
Soul music. You got some soul.
Herbie Hancock
Yeah.
going on along with it. Now you got even jazz guys who are turning into disco guys, or
Right,
you know,
right.
putting out records, instrumental that have a good beat. But yeah. So anyway, so everything's developing. I'm playing in a lounge band and coming home and writing, still doing my music, and but then when I hit, I think it was 75, is when I must have made those demos that I sent to Woodstock 75, and that would be Chrome Lover and I Want to Take You on a Sea Cruise. Some of my those are actually You Think You Really Know Me by 2 years or 1 year.
I want to ask. I want to ask you something before I forget. Why do you think people are in disbelief that was recorded? That was recorded at like 75, 77? Because I've heard that reaction where it's like, oh, I mean, and I do agree the music's ahead of its time, but do you think that that's just because you had so much experience, not just musically and through composition, but also with the technology and the equipment at the time?
Oh, well, I'm not too sure how to answer that, but I just did the best I could at whatever equipment I had. But I'm not sure. Like I say, I often consider myself now at this point an amateur audiophile.
Right.
So I was into audio stuff. I knew the stereo store owners. They'd let me take home equipment and try it, and all this stuff. And so I'm very concerned sometimes with the audio too. I try to make my records sound the best I can. So and
No, I think they sound great.
The stability I have, but anyways, what I'm trying to say is the records I still hadn't reached. You Think You Really Know Me. It was a build-up. I'm playing in a lounge band. I've done experimental music. I've met Captain Beefheart. I've met John Cage. I've actually met Frank Zappa, but had a picture somehow, and that was just a coincidence that he was walking through the hallway, and then he stopped and got a picture of me and Zappa or something. I lost that Polaroid from the 1968 or something. But I saw Zappa many times. Like I say, I saw him when he had Flo and Eddie. He always had.
I like that. I like that incarnation where you had Flo and Eddie in the group during the 200 Motels era. I love that.
Oh yeah. It was, and I saw him at the Fillmore East when they cut. Actually, it was 2 nights at the Fillmore East. That's an album actually that was recorded there from the Fillmore East. And it's got the Turtle guys, and he's got these super players behind him. I forget the drummer, Ansley Dunbar or Bosio, one of those guys. And now he's got like these super players. But I always go back to I like the original guys. He became, nothing wrong with him. He's very, very prolific. You got to give Zappa credit. I mean,
oh yeah.
Put out a ton of stuff, and I saw 200 Motels when it was put out.
Yeah.
And that was a weird one because
I
can't remember the year, but I was in a small town with my parents, and they used to have a theaters that they'd open up so the parents could go shopping in the small towns. So the local theater would have a deal, and 200 Motels was playing, and and I'm still young. I don't know, what year did that come out? Do you remember? 70, 69, 70?
Yeah,
pretty early.
Yeah.
But it was nice seeing it on the big screen when it came out. But because that's quite an achievement for a film, I have to say.
I was gonna. Yeah, that the way that film is edited and how Zappa's never really in the film. He's just kind of this like. He's almost like the devil, or he's like this mystic, and you could see that he really wanted to be like a film editor, and he worked in a way that he edited his stuff. He cut things in a way that a film editor would cut.
Yeah. Like I say, the early Zappa I always liked.
I like the early stuff better too. My favorite's actually Ruben and the Jets. That's believe it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's my favorite.
See, that was that whole period where he was beginning. I remember my first album actually was when Freak Out came out, and I bought that album. And then, like you said, he started progressing into Absolutely Free. That was a good one.
Oh yeah.
Matter of fact, when I saw him in Rochester, New York, in '68 or '9. I don't know what year. So that's what they were doing, absolutely free. Actually, the music from that, extended solos. I remember, kind of jazz sort of. When I say jazz, I don't mean swing. Kind of
No. He's
Zappa
Zappa
style.
jazz.
Stravinsky meets
Yeah.
jazz or something.
Right.
You could hear it in a lot of, you could hear Edgar Perez. But anyway, so here's another band, The Fugs.
I love Fugs. Yeah, love the Fugs.
And you're one of the few people I got, not an art, but some magazine asked me, what band, Velvet Underground or The Fugs? I said, definitely The Fugs. I said, the Fugs were one of the first underground rock bands. I said,
They predate Elvis. They predate and that's not even like that's like basically 65 they started like
Wyatt album from '63.
Oh, exactly. You see, that's like that. It comes from that comes from nowhere.
And that one was what I remember because they had the first couple ones were ESP records, were on ESP.
Yeah.
And then they put out one after that was actually recorded before those other two. I guess the first two on ESP were more commercial than this first one. But the first one was called Virgin Fugs.
Which is actually their first. And that's actually they released it later, but it's their first stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like real primitive, real.
That's when I think that's when CIA Man
and guitars and you could really see the rawness in that album. You could see why it's very. You could see why they probably hesitated to release that first. There's a lot of swearing. They were testing the boundaries of censorship. I mean, saying things, fuck, saying all this stuff at the records. And back then, that was taboo. You had people like Lenny Bruce getting arrested for saying fuck on stage, and so the Fugs were like notorious. Ed Sanders, he owned a bookstore in the Village.
Oh, he's a genius.
Radical books and magazines. So he would often get raided by, the FBI and everybody, and then he'd have to, he had many episodes. But here's a kicker on that one.
Yeah, shoot.
The bass player ended up becoming the engineer at Bearsville Studios.
Really?
I contacted, and I got to talk to him a little, actually. Bearsville's right next to Woodstock.
Yeah.
Ed Sanders, for a while, was the editor of the Woodstock Times, actually, in Woodstock, but he lives there. And I, because I was trying to track down my tapes at Bearsville.
So, okay.
So that's why I called, and then all of a sudden, I forget what his name was, and I go, I said, geez, you guys were one of my favorite bands when I was growing up. I said, anyways, I said, well, tell Ed Sanders. I said, hello. I said, he goes, okay, I'll tell him, But anyways, and I stayed in contact every now and then with Robbie Dupree. He was one of the only ones in those early days, that took an interest in me. And I was a real pest, when I look back at those days, trying to push myself, so to speak.
I think it's all necessary. It's all necessary for the. I mean, sometimes. I mean, I'm not the same person now, creatively, or in general as I was maybe about like even 3+ years ago. So it's a part of it's a part of that, and you do kind of look back, and I mean, I think of like a lot of past band members, and kind of. I've sabotaged my own opportunities a lot creatively, but I think that I did it in this pursuit I had this grandiosity at the time too. Like it was like I was like I won't. It's like I won't sell it for less. But I'll turn this down, but you can't turn me down. Was basically how I was kind of my approach.
Yeah, well, sometimes you got to do it yourself. See?
Oh yeah.
I know more people. It's much easier now. When I was doing it, like I say, it was a time where you had to. And I'm a small town, so things weren't as easy to do. Like printing and all this. And back then, you had to, literally scratch on the lettering on the photo to make the album cover. I remember we had to like scratch on lettering on pictures and hope you don't fuck it up, because now you got to get another print up with the photo.
Yeah.
And and then shipping. I'll tell you, you think you really know me? I rejected the first 2 or 3 shipments of albums that came to my house.
Really?
And it wasn't easy back then because it was like snow, I remember, and we lived on a hill, so the truck, would have to come up. And, we only pressed 300 copies, the original. And, and I got and the pressing plant was in Cincinnati, right? Cincinnati, Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
So now I reject the first batch. So I got to send back all these boxes again by freight. And okay, now it comes back again. I reject it again because I didn't like the fidelity.
Right.
But then they finally did it perfect. I remember. That's why I always tell people, if you get the original, you think you really know me. That's the best. That's actually the best one. Then the other ones were kind of, I made a 15 IPS copy of the 7.5-inch.
It's been reissued a few times, hasn't it? You think
yes.
You Really Know Me?
Yeah. Yes, it has.
Yeah.
But the original one, I got a thing where, on eBay it was $1,900.
Wow.
Yeah, and 1,000 here and there, 1,400. Well, so it's, like I say, only printed up a certain amount, and those were like, and it's a funny story. When I came to San Diego, I ran out of money. So I brought a box of albums with me, and 25 or 30 brand new shrink wrapped. You think you really know me? And I went down to the used record store, I remember, in San Diego, and this was like 1978, right? And I bring in 10 albums, right? Because they buy used albums.
Yeah.
And the owner looks at the album. He's looking it over. He goes, "Guy kind of looks like you." I said, "Geez, I wish he was." And then he gave me like $1 or something an album, I remember, and now they go for thousands.
Oh man!
And then I broke a bunch of them. I used to break them on stage, sometimes over my head, and I destroyed a lot of my stuff. Posters that I
is that a part of the? Was that a statement, or were you genuinely like, "I hate this fucking mix"?
I'm not sure what it meant.
You don't know what it meant.
Like I say, I've done it so long that now it just everything comes natural to me when I do things. I don't know, just things I think of for a moment. It's probably because I used to be interested in art too in the period. When I was in junior high.
You are an artist.
Yeah,
you are art.
I used to get in art shows where I would do paintings. And this is a whole other story. Now we're getting into another. This is like before I got out of high school and stuff. I was a painter for a while, and I wrecked my dad's cellar where I recorded "You Think You're." No, I didn't wreck it, but splattered paint on the bottom was on the floor. I remember he'd get mad at me. But I would make these large, 6 foot by 6 foot sheets of plywood or something, and then nail tires and a chair, and bales of hay again, and flour and paint, and make these like kind of sculptures off of these pieces of board. I knew when to stop. Let's put it that way. As far as my own, I wasn't just fucking around. I knew when not. So anyway, I would make these massive paintings, I remember, and I got into some pretty big art shows. Again, another one at some arena in Binghamton or something, another state one where all the New York artists came. Not the big guys like Pollock or any of those, but a lot of painters, artists came down for this big event. And then I had mine in the show in 3 days or 2 days. So I had these huge. This was like my learning process because, like I said, I'm still in junior high school or high school. I'm still not out of high school. So I was still exploring painting and stuff too. So like I say, and I put on like $100,000 or $200,000, and I would watch reactions by people, and I title them "Please Don't Make Me Cry" or something. And they'd look at these and go 200,000, and then
Yeah.
there'd be like these 6-foot, like kind of Robert Rauschenberg, the painter, was one of my big influences. I liked his stuff, and and it was interesting. See, that's how I was learning. Like like I said, I was still young, so I'm learning what affects people somehow. Because they would walk past a lot of good painters, a lot of good artists, right? They had a goddamn arena filled with good painters.
Yeah.
But whenever they came to mine, they would stop. And I would be hiding, kind of watching reactions. I didn't want people to see me. And I would see the reactions and think, now, okay, we're going to incorporate this into my show somehow, right? To my John Cage period. And so now, anyways, but to make a long story short, the whole thing kind of came together, and it took time, as I mentioned, and then I shopped You Think You Really Know Me around, and then I made contacts in Woodstock, so they were already on Electra Asylum and Warner Brothers, some of these people, and
Yeah.
so they said, well, LA, go try these places. Here's the A&R guy, tell him I sent you.
So you had a lot of conversations with A&R people.
Well, yeah, a little bit, but mostly rejections. That's why I said one day I was going to publish a book of all the rejections I got from record labels that rejected You Think You Really Know Me. And it was a funny thing, too, because I had a manager for a while in New York City. This is 77, right? Before I moved to LA. And he was Screamin' Jay Hawkins' manager also.
Huh.
So he was shopping my record around also. And he would, but he had a little more clout because of Screamin' Jay. And, he would go to these places and, like big labels. And he would, Columbia, all the big labels at the time. And he said, even in one of the big labels, they had my poster hung up behind the president's fucking office or something.
Really?
And all the remarks were, they love the album, but they don't know how to market it.
Yeah, that's always a strange place to be.
I couldn't figure it out,
yeah,
though, because at 77, you had Talking Heads, you had all these people that were interesting.
You had Gary Newman, you had
you had a lot of people.
You know what I mean? Like at that would have been the perfect, and that's what I mean. Like I think that record to me sounds like just something that is of a more obscure of a more obscure class compared to like all of the weird shit that was going on at that time, because it was punk, but it was the punk era, but you have I mean it just makes sense. It sounds like the perfect time. It seemed like it, you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I even went to like Sire Records, these ones that people were already on, and
yeah, the artists we're talking about, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so I don't know, again, it's competitive. It always has been. In my case, labels have always kind of hard to come by sometimes, And,
yeah.
But anyway, so I had exhausted that, and I went to LA, and I thought I'll spend, a month here, maybe 2 weeks in Hollywood. So I went to all the places. I even went to Frank Zappa's manager had a, for Bizarre Records, that the label Bizarre.
Was that guy Herb Cohen or something like that?
Yeah, that's it, Herb Cohen. So I even dropped off You Think You Really Know Me at his office. And went to a bunch of places, couldn't get a bite. I remember still couldn't get a bite from anybody.
Yeah.
And then my keyboard player, who we grew up at Endicott together, he was now living in San Diego for a few years prior, before I came out there.
Yeah.
And he says, well, why don't you come down to San Diego and we'll get a couple gigs down here with the Blind Dates. I had nothing better to do. I said, all right, well, give it a try. And then
I think Diego's a nice place. It seems I've actually never really spent much time there, but I was only in Los Angeles for about a year or so. But I think it's kind of it's a different kind of city than LA. I'm not too sure. I mean,
well, San Diego's much more, as they say, more laid back than LA. So,
okay, that makes sense.
Or even though
nice.
we have, you still have some good things, like I said, and that's the fun. You got the universities always. UCSD is very progressive. Matter of fact, that's the last place I saw John Cage. Was
wow.
UCSD. My girlfriend was a grad student there. So I got to spend a lot of time there, and she was doing art there too. So we were doing performances there. Prior to everybody thinking I disappeared, we were still, doing some pretty wild stuff at the university. And John Cage was kind of like a visiting artist for a month or two in residence. So they were doing a bunch of shows with John Cage. And and then my girlfriend, because she had a studio on the campus, right, for her art and stuff, she had my albums, a couple of them. You Think You Really Know Me? So John Cage, okay, he's doing some show at one of the auditoriums, and so I could go there with my album or something, and there's John Cage by himself. I remember sitting near the entrance or the exit, I can't remember now, but sitting by himself, I remember. So I went up to John Cage. I said, "Mr. Cage, do you remember me?" From literally 20, 30 years ago or whatever it would have been. He looked at me, he said, "Oh, yeah, but I don't know if he did," but he said, "Yeah," and then I handed him the album. I said, "You inspired me for this album." And then he died a few years later or something, literally a year or two later, but
Wow.
anyways, so I got to at least talk to him again. I don't know, but that was a big moment. But like I say, everything kind of evolved, and then I get out here, so now I got to make some money, right?
Yeah.
So now I'm down in San Diego, so I'm living in the Blind Date house. They had a house that they would rehearse in, so I'm staying there, not enjoying it because of lack of privacy.
Yeah.
But anyways, so we booked a bunch of gigs down here and cut 2 records. 1978, we made the single In the Midnight Hour, and another one after that, a couple other ones after that. But then I had to make money, so I was a bass player. So here's a good one, a blues band called the Big City Blues Band. It was a working blues band in San Diego. So they needed a bass player.
Mhm.
So I needed money.
No,
So
no.
they asked me to join. So, and I was never into blues, to tell you the truth.
Interesting. Yeah.
I always kind of considered it too jammy for me, too many jamming. I have nothing against it. But,
No, yeah, and you're also of a jazz. You're of an avant-garde in jazz and classical lineage. So I always see blues being the one that breaks away from that, or you know what I mean, like the first example of breaking away from that.
Yeah, and that's a specialty. Well, but this was a good learning process for me. So, anyways, because like I said, I just left the band last night. I leave the band. I was playing with the Peggy Lee's piano player and all those, sophisticated jazz stuff, but not just straight ahead jazz either. Pop jazz. We had to do pop jazz.
Yeah, like Billie Holiday stuff.
Oh, well, even stuff too that was kind of current. Dionne Warwick, maybe, or
Yeah, jazz singer type stuff.
And bossa novas,
Yeah.
But anyway, so I got in this blues band, Big City Blues Band, and we were good actually. We were, okay. Now we got to learn how to play 5 hours worth of blues, how to make it interesting, because of it. And so it was a good learning process. So we were working a lot. We had a good band actually. I often thought we should have propelled much farther with it, and that led into another direction. Now all of a sudden, the William Morris agent who was representing some blues legend guys, like Roy Brown and Percy Mayfield and Big J McNeely, some of these artists that were older men. They needed people to back them.
Yeah.
So Big City Blues Band wasn't this like kind of rock and blues. We were more authentic. That's why, we were more of an authentic blues band, but very good, very good. We had Hammond organ, we were very good. Ended up with even 2 horns in the section, but so all of a sudden they come down, they really like us, they go down. I don't know why they couldn't find a band in LA, but they come down to San Diego. And next thing I'm playing with these legends, blues guys you only hear about. Roy Brown, look him up one time. Roy Brown. You know, people say Chuck Berry invented rock. I say Roy Brown. He was big. Good Rockin' Tonight. He had a whole bunch of stuff back in the late '40s into the '50s. Anyways, he was trying to make a comeback, so I ended up playing bass with him for a while. That was a real treat. I always talk about one of the last shows before he died. It must have been 1980, 81 or something. The how's that called? The Whiskey a Go Go.
Yeah.
Now this is electric. This is sold out, right? So
Right.
the big deal going on. So Roy Brown's coming back, and all the blues people from LA. I mean, these, it was a funny thing. You thought it was a joke when you thought of guys in their Cadillacs and Lincolns. You got all these guys, 80-year-old blues guys showing up to pay respect to Roy Brown, right?
Nice.
So it was a phenomenal night. I have to say that was one of the most electric nights. And in the dressing room, they brought like the original DJ from 1949 or something.
Oh wow.
From Detroit, so he was emceeing it. And they got the original sax guy from his records back then. And again, another, having been playing with blues bands now back then, this was the real stuff. Like I said, I was real intrigued by the sax player. He was, like I said, these guys are all older, man. But he played the real thing. And I remember us all sitting in the dressing room, like I say, it was, these blues guys all around and the real talking, reminiscent of the old days, how it used to be. And, it was a real joy, I have to say. I always look back at that and think that was the highlight of the blues era with Gary when I was playing with a blues band. But, we played, a bunch of places. I remember playing a gig with Etta James and, all kinds of people. But, those guys, like I said, when you get off with me, check out Roy Brown.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I do want to ask you. We're just gonna wrap things up here because I'm almost taking away 2 hours of your genius. So I want to just anything else you want to say about the record?
Well, coming soon. Supposed to be February, but you never know with record labels. But yeah, I'm kind of excited about it. It should be a fun thing, I think. The Marshmallow Man is coming to a town near you.
Gary, it really was a pleasure to speak with you. I hope we talk again soon. And I want everyone to know who's listening to this that this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to talk to Gary Wilson. I don't know.